12 guards had already failed to control Alessandro Salvatore's black stallion when Elena Torres, 8 months pregnant and barely 5 feet tall, stepped into the paddock with nothing but a sugar cube in her trembling hand. Blood streaked the dirt where the third man had fallen. Someone was shouting for tranquilizers. Another guard clutched his dislocated shoulder, face twisted in pain. The Mafia boss himself stood frozen on the terrace above, watching his empire's symbol of power, 1,000 pounds of pure black rage, rear up again, hooves slicing through morning air like blades. The horse screamed. Not a whinny, not a neigh, a sound that belonged to something wounded beyond reason. The estate sprawled across 70 acres of Napa Valley's private hill country, where vineyards gave way to oak forests and money-bought silence. Alessandro Salvatore owned it all, the main house with its limestone facade, the guest cottages scattered like afterthoughts, the stables that housed horses worth more than most people's homes. This morning that wealth meant nothing. His men surrounded the stallion like they were negotiating with a bomb. Owen Kane, head of security, barked orders nobody could follow. Flanking positions. Don't let him get to the fence again. Too late. Midnight charged left, scattering 3 guards like pins. His coat gleamed black under the California sun, muscles rippling with every violent movement. Ropes hung from his neck where restraints had been torn free. Now, welts marked his shoulders. He'd been fighting for 20 minutes straight. From the gate 40 feet away, Elena watched it all unfold. She'd been carrying laundry to the West Wing when she heard the commotion. Her first instinct was to keep walking. She'd learned that lesson her first day here. Hired quietly through an agency that asked no questions, paid modestly in cash, instructed very clearly to clean rooms and stay invisible. 3 weeks in, she'd perfected the art of not being seen. But the horse's scream stopped her cold. Her hand drifted instinctively to her swollen belly, feeling the baby shift inside. 8 months pregnant, ankles swollen, back aching constantly. She should have been resting. Instead, she set the laundry basket down and walked to the paddock fence. The scene before her was chaos pretending to be control. 12 men, trained security personnel who probably carried weapons she didn't want to think about, circled a terrified animal. They moved like predators, all tension and coiled aggression. The horse responded in kind, eyes rolling white, nostrils flared, every muscle screaming flight or fight. Eleanor recognized fear when she saw it. She'd grown up in rural Montana, where her father worked cattle ranches and taught her young that animals don't respond to force. They respond to safety, or the promise of it. She'd watched men twice her father's size fail to load a spooked mare into a trailer, then watched her dad stand quietly at the ramp with an apple and wait. The mare loaded herself within 5 minutes. Patience wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Owen noticed her first. "Ma'am, you need to clear the area. Now." Eleanor didn't move. She watched midnight charge again, watched the guards scatter, watched the animal slam into the fence hard enough to splinter wood. He stumbled back, sides heaving, foam flecking his mouth. He was hurting himself, badly. "I said clear out." Owen's voice cut sharper this time. "That horse is dangerous." "He's scared," Elena said quietly. "What?" "He's scared, not dangerous, scared." Another guard, younger, bleeding from a cut above his eye, turned on her. "Lady, that thing nearly killed 3 of us. Get back to whatever you were doing before you get hurt." Elena looked at him, then at the horse, then at the men surrounding Midnight like a firing squad waiting for permission. She reached into her apron pocket. The sugar cube was small, half melted from body heat. She'd saved it from breakfast that morning, a tiny luxury from the staff kitchen. She'd planned to have it with afternoon tea. Now, holding it in her palm, it felt like something else entirely. An offering, a bridge, a test. "Ma'am, step back." Owen moved toward her, hand raised. "I'm not asking again." Eleanor looked past him to the horse. Midnight had stopped charging. He stood in the center of the paddock, sides heaving, head low, exhausted, defeated. Still terrified, but too tired to keep fighting. She knew that feeling intimately. Before Owen could reach her, Elena opened the gate. "What are you doing?" Multiple voices erupted at once. "Hey, stop! Somebody grab her!" Elena stepped into the paddock. Dust hung in the air like suspended breath. The morning sun felt too bright, too hot. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The baby kicked once, hard as if protesting this decision. But Elena had already made her choice 3 weeks ago when she accepted this job despite having no references, no family, nowhere else to go. She'd chosen survival. She'd chosen to keep moving forward even when every reasonable voice said stop. This was no different. Midnight's head snapped up. His eyes locked on hers, wild, hurting, waiting for the next threat. Eleanor stopped walking. She stood 15 feet away, hand resting on her belly, the other at her side. She didn't approach, didn't rush, didn't make demands. She waited. "Get out of there before he kills you." Elena ignored him. She spoke instead to the horse, voice low and steady. "It's all right," she whispered. "You don't have to fight anymore." Before Elena takes another step toward that 1,000-pound animal, like this video and drop your country in the comments, because this story traveled across continents to reach you. And I want to see how far love and courage can go. The stallion snorted. His ears flicked forward, then back. Every muscle in his body remained coiled, ready to explode. Elena slowly lifted her hand. The sugar cube rested on her palm, small and white against her brown skin. She extended her arm. One breath, two, three. The paddock held its silence like a prayer. Midnight took one cautious step forward. Elena didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there with her palm open, offering what little she had. The stallion snorted again, violently this time. His head tossed, guards tensed behind her, and everyone held their breath. The stallion took another step. Elena remained motionless. Her arm ached from holding it extended, the sugar cube growing warm against her skin. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, feel sweat forming at her hairline despite the morning chill. Behind her, 12 guards formed a half circle of tense bodies and held weapons. Midnight's nostrils flared, testing the air. His ears swiveled forward, then pinned back, forward again. The internal war played out across his massive frame, every muscle twitching between trust and terror. Eleanor knew that war intimately. Her father used to say animals were honest in ways people never could be. They showed you exactly what they felt. Fear didn't hide behind smiles or polite words. It showed in the whites of eyes, the tension in shoulders, the readiness to bolt. When she was 7, her father brought her to a ranch outside Billings where a gelding had been beaten so badly he wouldn't let anyone within 10 feet. The owner wanted him put down. Her father knelt in the dirt for 6 hours with a bucket of oats and said nothing. The horse ate eventually. That lesson lived in Elena's bones now. She'd learned young that force breaks things, patience builds them. She'd watched men fail where quiet persistence succeeded, watched her father gentle horses that ranchers called lost causes. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd learned those lessons from a man who eventually left when life got too difficult. But the knowledge remained even after he didn't. Midnight took another step. Closer now. Close enough that Elena could see the cuts where ropes had chafed his neck raw. Close enough to smell the sharp tang of his sweat, the copper scent of blood somewhere on his coat. "Easy," she murmured. Not a command, just acknowledgement. Nobody's going to hurt you here. Behind her, Owen Kane's voice came low and urgent. "If he charges, hit the ground. We'll handle it." Handle it meant shoot it. Elena understood that without needing translation. Her hand stayed extended. The morning sun cut through the paddock dust, turning the air golden and thick. Eleanor's worn canvas shoes looked small and fragile in the dirt, purchased second-hand from a thrift store in Modesto 3 months ago. The contrast between her frame and the stallion's felt absurd. She barely reached 5 feet tall, even in decent shoes. Midnight stood nearly 17 hands high, probably weighed 1,200 pounds. One kick could kill her instantly. The baby shifted inside her belly, a rolling movement that pressed against her bladder. 8 months pregnant, alone in California, working a job that paid cash under the table because she couldn't risk official paperwork. She'd left Montana with $300 and a determination to disappear. She'd succeeded at disappearing, maybe too well. 3 weeks in this place and nobody knew her name beyond the new girl. She cleaned bathrooms, changed linens, scrubbed floors after parties she wasn't invited to. The other staff were kind but distant. Everyone kept their heads down on an estate owned by Alessandro Salvatore. You didn't ask questions. You didn't make waves. You stayed invisible and grateful for the paycheck. Invisibility had felt safe until this moment. Now, standing in the center of this paddock with guards watching and a terrified animal 3 feet away, Elena realized something fundamental. She was tired of being invisible, tired of shrinking, tired of apologizing for taking up space in a world that kept telling her she didn't belong anywhere. If she was going to risk something, let it be for a choice she made, not one made for her. Midnight's head lowered slightly. His eyes, dark and liquid and full of something Elena recognized, fixed on her face. She held his gaze. Not challenging, just present. "I know," she whispered. "I know it hurts." The stallion's ear flicked toward her voice. Eleanor felt eyes on her back. Not just the guards. Someone else. Someone watching from above. from the main house with its limestone walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. She couldn't see who, didn't dare turn around, but the weight of that attention pressed against her shoulders like a physical thing. Whoever it was, they were watching closely. Midnight took the final step. He stood directly before her now, massive and trembling. His breath came in short bursts. Foam still flecked the corners of his mouth. Up close, Elena could see the intelligence behind the fear, the awareness. This animal knew exactly what humans could do, had learned it the hard way. She kept her palm steady. "You get to choose," she said softly. "Take it or don't, but nobody's going to force you." The guards behind her hadn't moved, but Elena felt their tension like electricity in the air. Fingers hovering near holsters, bodies coiled to intervene. Owen probably had his hand on his weapon right now, waiting for this to go wrong. Elena's arm burned from holding the position. Her back ached, her feet hurt. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing her mother's racing pulse. But she didn't lower her hand. Midnight's nostrils flared one more time. His head dipped lower, lower. His muzzle came within inches of her palm. Elena could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the individual hairs on his coat catching sunlight. She held her breath. The world narrowed to this moment, this choice, this fragile bridge between two terrified creatures who both understood what it meant to fight for survival. Midnight's lips touched her palm, soft, gentle, nothing like the violence from moments before. He took the sugar cube carefully, as if afraid to break the spell. His warm breath washed over her skin. The sweetness disappeared between his teeth. For 3 heartbeats neither moved. Elena slowly lifted her other hand, the one that had been resting on her belly, and reached toward Midnight's neck. He flinched. She stopped, waited, let him decide. He leaned forward, just slightly. Her fingers touched the coarse hair of his mane, then his neck. She felt his pulse hammering beneath her palm, felt the tension in muscles that had been fighting for so long they'd forgotten how to rest. "Good," she whispered. "You're so good." Behind her, someone exhaled audibly. A guard muttered something she couldn't hear. Owen's voice came sharp and low. "Nobody move?" Not yet. But Elena barely heard them. She stood with her hand on the stallion's neck, feeling him tremble beneath her touch, feeling something impossible happen in real time. The animal who couldn't be controlled, who'd thrown 12 trained men, who'd been seconds away from being destroyed. He stood perfectly still and let a pregnant stranger touch him. The morning sun climbed higher. Dust settled. The paddock fell into a silence so complete, Elena could hear the wind moving through distant oak trees. Midnight's breathing began to slow. The stallion's warm breath had touched her palm. He'd taken the sugar. And now the paddock held its silence like something sacred. From the limestone terrace 60 feet above, Alessandro Salvatore watched a pregnant woman dismantle his understanding of power in under 5 minutes. He stood motionless, one hand gripping the iron railing, the other holding a cup of coffee gone cold. He'd been on a conference call with his attorneys when Owen's frantic radio transmission cut through. "Sir, the stallion's out of control. We might need to put him down." Alessandro had ended the call without explanation and walked outside to witness the chaos. He'd expected to see his men handle the situation with their usual efficiency. Instead, he watched them fail spectacularly. 12 guards, 12 trained security personnel who'd worked for him between 3 and 15 years each. Men who'd handled situations far more dangerous than an animal. They'd scattered like children afraid of the dark. Then the maid appeared. Alessandro knew who she was in the abstract sense. New hire, brought on 3 weeks ago through the agency they used for staff who needed discretion more than references. He'd signed off on her employment without meeting her, the way he signed off on dozens of operational decisions daily. Maria, the head housekeeper, had mentioned her once. Quiet girl, pregnant. Works hard, keeps to herself. He'd filed that information away and forgotten it. Until now. Now, watching this woman stand perfectly still while Midnight took sugar from her palm, Alessandro felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Not attraction, not sympathy, something closer to disorientation. The feeling of watching gravity reverse itself. He was 38 years old. He'd built an empire on fear and calculated violence before most men figured out their career paths. His father had been a soldier in the organization. Alessandro became the architect. He'd taken the family business and transformed it into something larger, more sophisticated, more untouchable. Judges in his pocket, politicians who owed him favors, rivals who'd learned the cost of challenging him. Control was his language. Domination was his currency. Gentleness was weakness, that's what his father taught him. What the streets confirmed, what every power struggle reinforced. People respected force, they understood threats. Kindness got you killed or taken advantage of. The strong survived by making others afraid to challenge them. Alessandro had never questioned that philosophy. Below, the pregnant maid placed her hand on the stallion's neck. Midnight didn't move, didn't rear, didn't attack. He stood there like she'd performed some kind of miracle. Midnight had arrived 6 months ago as a gift. Gift was a generous term. The Brennan family sent him with a polite note about mutual respect and shared interests. Alessandro understood the real message. The horse was a test. Accept it, and he acknowledged the Brennans standing as equals. Refuse it, and he insulted them publicly. Both options carried consequences. He accepted the horse. The problem started immediately. Midnight wouldn't let anyone near him. 3 different trainers tried and quit. The stable manager suggested euthanasia. Alessandro refused, partly because killing the horse would hand the Brennans ammunition, partly because he didn't like admitting defeat. So Midnight stayed. A £1,000 problem Alessandro couldn't solve and couldn't discuss. The horse became a symbol of something he didn't want to examine too closely. His ability to control his world had limits. This animal was proof. Every morning he watched from various windows as his staff struggled with basic care. Feeding Midnight required tactical planning. Cleaning his stall became a hazardous assignment. The horse existed in a constant state of rage, and Alessandro had no solution. He'd accepted that failure, compartmentalized it, added it to the list of problems that would resolve themselves eventually or disappear. Gabriel stood 3 feet away, hands clasped behind his back. His assistant had worked for him for 8 years. Loyal, discreet, smart enough to read Alessandro's moods and adjust accordingly. "Should we intervene, sir?" Gabriel asked carefully. Alessandro didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes tracked the woman's movements with an intensity that surprised him. She stroked Midnight's neck slowly, her fingers moving through his mane with confident gentleness. Her lips moved, forming words Alessandro couldn't hear from this distance. Whatever she was saying, the horse responded. Midnight's head lowered. His ears, which had been pinned back in fury minutes ago, swiveled forward, the tension in his shoulders visibly released. He looked almost peaceful, a word Alessandro had never associated with that animal. The woman kept speaking, kept touching. She appeared completely unafraid, despite being 8 months pregnant and standing next to a creature that could kill her without effort. The contrast between her size and the stallion's made the scene look surreal. She barely reached his shoulder, yet she commanded his attention completely. Alessandro's worldview was built on observable truth. Power came from strength. Control came from dominance. Fear maintained order. He'd watched these principles work countless times. In boardrooms, in back alleys, in situations where mistakes cost lives. This woman, this pregnant maid whose name he couldn't remember, had just proved him wrong. She'd approached Midnight without weapons, without threats, without force. She'd offered him sugar and patience. The horse, who'd been seconds away from being destroyed, responded to something Alessandro didn't understand. His chest felt strange, tight, like something fundamental had shifted and his body hadn't adjusted yet. "Sir," Gabriel prompted gently. Alessandro finally spoke. "What's her name?" "I'm sorry?" "The woman. What's her name?" Gabriel pulled out his phone, checking something quickly. "Elena Torres. Hired 3 weeks ago through the standard channels. Background check cleared. No family listed. No emergency contacts. No family. No emergency contacts." Alessandro filed that information away. Below, Midnight bowed his head lower. The movement looked almost reverent. Elena's hand remained on his neck, steady and sure. The paddock had gone completely silent. Even the guards stood frozen, afraid to break whatever spell had been cast. Alessandro watched the stallion bow to this woman, and without realizing it, without conscious thought or permission, he exhaled the breath he'd been holding. The guards stepped back slowly, like men waking from a dream they didn't understand. Owen Kane moved first, approaching Elena with the caution usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. His radio crackled. Someone asked if they should call the vet. Owen waved them off, eyes fixed on the woman who'd just accomplished the impossible. "How did you?" He trailed off, unable to finish the question. Eleanor kept her hand on Midnight's neck, feeling his breathing steady beneath her palm. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last 10 minutes began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and the uncomfortable awareness that 12 armed men were staring at her. "He was just scared," she said quietly. "Animals usually are." Owen blinked. "That's it? He was scared? People think fear looks like aggression." Sometimes it does. Eleanor stroked Midnight's mane one more time, then carefully stepped back. The horse watched her but didn't move. He needed someone to stop fighting him. Owen looked at the stallion, then at Elena, then at the 3 injured guards being helped toward the main house. His expression suggested he was trying to reconcile what he'd witnessed with everything his training had taught him. He pulled out his radio. Owen to Mr. Salvatore.
Static, then a voice. Go ahead.
Sir, the maid somehow calmed Midnight. Situation is under control. What do you want us to do? The pause lasted 3 seconds. Eleanor felt her stomach drop. Bring her to my study. Now. The radio clicked off. Owen turned to Elena, his face professionally neutral. You heard him. Let's go. Fear arrived, cold and sudden. Being summoned by Alessandro Salvatore was never good. Elena knew this the way she knew fire burned. You didn't get called to meet the boss unless you'd done something wrong or were about to be told your services were no longer needed. She'd just done both, probably. I need to wash up first, Elena managed. Owen glanced at her dirt-streaked apron, her dusty shoes. 5 minutes. Meet me at the east entrance. The walk to the staff quarters felt longer than it should have. Elena's hands shook as she scrubbed dirt from her palms, changed into her spare uniform, tried to make herself presentable. The mirror in the tiny bathroom showed a woman who looked older than 26. Dark circles under brown eyes, hair pulled back in a practical bun, the exhaustion of 8 months carrying a baby while working 60-hour weeks. She'd been invisible here, safe in her invisibility. Now she was about to walk into the lion's den. The main house sprawled across 12,000 square feet of architectural ambition. Elena had cleaned most of it, but never really looked at it. Now, being escorted by Owen through the east wing, she couldn't help noticing details. Marble floors imported from Italy, art hanging on walls that probably cost more than she'd earn in her lifetime, crown moulding that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. Everything was tasteful, expensive, deliberately understated in the way only the truly rich could manage. Her canvas shoes made soft squeaking sounds against the polished stone. They passed a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley, a library with leather-bound books and a fireplace large enough to stand in, a dining room with a table that could seat 20. Each space felt more like a museum than a home, beautiful, cold, untouched. Eleanor's thoughts raced. 3 weeks here and she'd managed to stay beneath notice. Cleaned rooms, changed linens, kept her mouth shut. Maria had told her the rules on day 1. Mr. Salvatore values discretion above everything. Do your work. Don't ask questions. Don't make problems. Elena had followed those rules religiously. The pregnancy complicated everything. She needed this job. Needed the cash payments that didn't require tax forms or identification verification. Needed a place to stay until the baby came and she figured out her next move. She'd left Montana with almost nothing. Couldn't go back. Had no family to call. This job was survival. She'd risked all of it for a horse. The realization hit her hard. She'd stepped into that paddock knowing it could cost her everything. Knowing it was reckless. Knowing she had no business doing it. But she'd done it anyway because watching that animal suffer felt worse than the alternative. Now she'd pay the price. Owen led her through another corridor, this one lined with photographs, black and white images of men in suits. Old California, the kind of history that came with blood and power and secrets buried deep. They stopped outside a heavy wooden door. Elena's heart hammered. The baby kicked, as if sensing her anxiety. She pressed one hand against her belly, trying to steady herself. Whatever happened next, she'd face it. She'd survived worse, left Montana pregnant and alone. Driven across country with $300 and no plan. Found work cleaning toilets because it paid cash. She could survive this too. If you're already wondering whether Alessandro will punish her or protect her, hit that like button. Trust me, what happens next is not what you'd expect. Owen glanced at her. Ready? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. He knocked twice, solid professional strikes against wood. From inside, a voice she'd never heard before, deep, controlled, absolutely certain of its authority. Enter. Owen opened the door and Elena stepped into a room that felt like walking into the center of Alessandro Salvatore's mind. Dark wood paneling covered the walls, rich mahogany that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 sides, filled with volumes that looked read rather than decorative. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface clear except for a laptop and a single fountain pen. Leather chairs faced the desk like supplicants waiting for judgment. Everything in the room radiated controlled power. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was soft. Alessandro sat behind the desk, perfectly still. He looked different than she'd imagined. Younger than his reputation suggested, maybe late 30s. Dark hair cut precisely, strong features that might have been handsome if they weren't so carefully composed. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, no tie. The casualness felt deliberate, like everything else about him. His eyes tracked her movement with unsettling intensity. Eleanor stood just inside the doorway, unsure whether to step forward or wait for permission. Her hands wanted to twist together nervously. She forced them still. "You handled my horse." Statement, not question. His voice matched the room. Deep. Controlled. A man who never needed to raise his volume to be heard. Elena swallowed. "I didn't mean to overstep, Mr. Salvatore. I can leave if—" "Sit." One word. Absolute command. Elena moved to the nearest chair and lowered herself carefully. The leather was expensive, the kind that molded to your body. She perched on the edge, unable to relax. Alessandro leaned back slightly, fingers stippled beneath his chin. He studied her the way someone might study a puzzle that didn't make sense. Not hostile, not friendly, just intensely curious. The silence stretched. Eleanor fought the urge to fill it with apologies or explanations. She'd learned that lesson from her father. When someone powerful is thinking, you let them think. Finally, Alessandro spoke. "How did you do it?" "I'm sorry." 12 men. Trained security. They couldn't get near midnight without him trying to kill them. You walked into that paddock 8 months pregnant and calmed him in under 5 minutes. How? Elena chose her words carefully. Instinct, mostly. I grew up around animals. They respond to what you're feeling more than what you're doing. Your men were trying to control him. I offered him a choice. A choice. Alessandro repeated the word like he was testing its weight. You gave a violent animal a choice. He's not violent. He's terrified. There's a difference. Something shifted in Alessandro's expression. Not softening, exactly. More like recognition. Explain. Elena took a breath. When animals are scared, they protect themselves. Fight or flight. Your horse couldn't flee, so he fought. The more your men tried to dominate him, the more he fought back. I didn't try to dominate him. I acknowledged what he was feeling and offered him something better than fighting. Sugar. Safety. The sugar was just the introduction. Alessandro stood abruptly. Elena tensed, but he didn't approach. He walked to the window overlooking the paddock below. From here she could see Midnight standing quietly in the center, head lowered, finally at peace. I've owned that horse for 6 months, Alessandro said, his back to her. 3 trainers quit. My stable manager wanted him destroyed. I've spent considerable resources trying to solve a problem I couldn't solve. He turned, pinning her with his gaze. You solved it in 5 minutes. Eleanor didn't know how to respond to that. Alessandro moved back to his desk but didn't sit. He remained standing, hands resting on the chair back. From this position he could look down at her. Another power play, probably unconscious at this point. But when he looked at her, Elena saw something that surprised her. Not anger, not suspicion, genuine curiosity. He really looked at her for the first time. Not as a problem or an employee, but as a person. His eyes tracked the details. Her worn uniform, probably second-hand. The way she held herself despite obvious fear, spine straight even while sitting on the edge of her seat. The protective hand that kept drifting to her belly, an unconscious gesture she probably didn't realize she was doing. Something shifted in his expression. Internal. Subtle. The look of someone having their assumptions challenged. This woman wasn't trying to prove anything. She wasn't angling for recognition or advancement. She'd stepped into that paddock because watching Midnight suffer was intolerable. Consequences be damned. She acted from a different center than anyone in Alessandro's world. That realization landed with unexpected force. Where did you learn this? He asked, his tone less commanding now, more genuinely interested. Montana. My father worked cattle ranches around Billings. I spent most of my childhood watching him gentle horses other men had given up on. He taught me that animals don't need to be broken. They need to be understood. Your father sounds like a patient man. Elena's expression flickered. He was, with animals anyway. Alessandro caught the distinction. He filed it away for later examination. He stood in silence for a long moment, decision forming behind his eyes. Elena watched him, heart pounding, waiting for judgment. This was the moment. He'd either dismiss her or punish her for overstepping. She never expected what came next. The horse is yours to care for now. Alessandro's voice carried absolute finality. Report to the stables every morning. Owen will adjust your schedule accordingly. Elena stared at him, speechless. Her mouth opened, closed. No words came. Alessandro sat down, already turning his attention to the laptop on his desk. Conversation over. Decision made. I don't. Elena finally found her voice.
Mr.
Salvatore, I'm not a trainer. I'm here to clean. He looked up, one eyebrow raised slightly. Do you object to the reassignment? No, but… Then we're finished. He gestured toward the door. Owen will provide details. Elena stood on shaking legs. The room felt surreal. She'd walked in expecting to be fired. Instead, she had been given responsibility for a £1,200 animal worth more than she'd earned in 10 years. She reached the door before Alessandro spoke again. Miss Torres. She turned. He studied her one more time, expression unreadable. You were right about the horse. He wasn't violent. Just scared. Elena nodded slowly. That's a rare skill. Seeing the difference, he paused. Don't waste it. She left the study in a daze, the door closing softly behind her. News travelled fast through the estate staff. By lunch, everyone knew the pregnant maid had been summoned to Alessandro Salvatore's study. By dinner, everyone knew she'd been reassigned to care for the horse that had nearly killed 3 guards. Speculation filled the staff quarters like smoke. Why would he do that? Sophia, one of the housekeepers, whispered over dishes in the kitchen. She's 8 months pregnant. That animal is dangerous. Maybe he's testing her, another voice suggested. Or maybe he wants her gone and this is how he does it. One accident, problem solved. Elena heard the gossip but didn't engage. She collected her dinner, chicken and rice that tasted like cardboard, and ate alone in her small room. The space measured barely 10 by 12 feet, furnished with a twin bed, a dresser and a window overlooking the service road. Not much, but it was hers. Private. Safe. She stared at the ceiling that night, unable to sleep. The baby kicked rhythmically against her ribs. 6 weeks until her due date. 6 weeks to figure out what came next. The job paid enough to save a little, but not enough to afford real housing. She'd been sleeping in her car when Maria found her, offered her this position. Room and board included. Cash under the table. It had felt like salvation then. Now, lying in the dark, Elena wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Margaret found her the next morning before dawn. The head housekeeper was 63, efficient and protective of the younger staff in her particular way. She cornered Elena outside the staff entrance, coffee in hand, expression serious. I heard about your new assignment. Elena adjusted her clean apron. Yes, ma'am. Listen to me carefully. Margaret's voice dropped low. Don't get comfortable. Men like Alessandro Salvatore don't do kindness. They do transactions. Everything costs something. You just don't know the price yet. I'm just taking care of a horse. Nothing here is just anything. Margaret squeezed her shoulder. Be careful, Elena. You're a good girl. I don't want to see you hurt. The warning settled cold in Elena's stomach as she walked to the stables. Morning light broke across the valley in shades of gold and amber. The air smelled of hay and earth and the faint sweetness of jasmine growing along the paddock fence. Midnight stood in his stall, ears forward, watching her approach. Elena's nervousness returned sharp and immediate. Yesterday had been adrenaline and instinct. Today was responsibility. What if he didn't remember her? What if yesterday was luck? She opened the stall door slowly. Midnight turned his massive head, nostrils flaring. For 3 heartbeats they studied each other. Then he stepped forward and gently bumped her shoulder with his nose. Relief flooded through her. Good morning to you too. She'd brought apples from the kitchen, sliced thin. Midnight took them from her palm with the same careful gentleness as yesterday. Elena stroked his neck, feeling tension she hadn't known she carried begin to release. This could work. This could actually work. Over the following days, routine established itself. Elena arrived at dawn, brought fruit or carrots, spoke softly while grooming Midnight's coat. The stallion responded like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to treat him with basic kindness. His coat began to shine. His eyes lost their wild edge. He followed Elena around the paddock like an enormous loyal dog. The transformation was remarkable. Eleanor didn't notice Alessandro watching from the terrace, or the library window, or the second-floor hallway that overlooked the stables. He told himself he was protecting his investment, ensuring the horse stayed calm, making sure his decision hadn't been a mistake. But Gabrielle noticed. Sir, the quarterly reports need your signature. Alessandro signed without looking away from the window. Below, Elena brushed Midnight's mane, talking to him about something Gabriel couldn't hear. Also, the meeting with the distributors has been moved to Thursday. Fine. And the governor's office called about the fundraiser. Handle it. Gabriel set the papers aside. How is the horse doing? Alessandro finally turned from the window. Better. And the woman? What about her? Gabriel chose his words carefully. I've noticed you've been attentive to her welfare. Chef mentioned you asked about her meals. Maria said you inquired whether her room was adequate. Owen reported you wanted daily updates on her schedule. Alessandro's expression remained neutral. She's pregnant and responsible for a valuable animal. I'm ensuring she has what she needs to do her job effectively. Of course, sir. But they both knew it was more than that. Small changes appeared across the estate. The kitchen began preparing meals suited for pregnancy. More protein, fresh vegetables, careful seasoning. Elena's room received a better mattress, delivered without explanation. Her schedule was adjusted to include mandatory breaks. When she looked tired, someone always appeared with water or a place to sit. Eleanor sensed the attention but couldn't understand it. Nobody said anything directly. Things just happened. She was too exhausted to question good fortune. On the 5th morning, Alessandro appeared at the stables himself. Elena looked up from checking Midnight's hooves, startled. The Mafia boss stood at the fence in dark slacks and a white shirt, looking distinctly out of place among hay bales and horse equipment. Mr. Salvatore Carras, she straightened quickly, wiping her hands on her apron. How is he? Good. Really good. He's eating well, letting me handle him without any problems. Alessandro's eyes tracked Midnight, then returned to Elena. And you? I'm fine. You look tired. Elena laughed, the sound slightly bitter. I'm 8 months pregnant. Tired is standard. When are you due? 6 weeks. Give or take. Alessandro was quiet for a moment. The question was too personal for an employer to ask. Elena knew she should deflect. Instead, exhaustion made her honest. Not in the picture. Never was, really. Family? No. Friends? No. The single syllables painted a picture neither of them needed elaborated. Alessandro studied her with that same intense focus from his study. What's your plan? After the baby comes? Elena looked at Midnight instead of him. Keep working as long as I can. Save money. Figure out childcare. Hope everything works out. That's not a plan. That's hope disguised as strategy. It's all I have. The words hung between them, honest and stark. Alessandro's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to say something, reconsidered, turned to leave. Sir? Elena called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. Thank you for this opportunity. I know I don't deserve it. You calmed a horse 12 men couldn't handle. You earned it. He walked away without another word. The next morning, Elena found a card slipped under her door. Thick cardstock. Expensive. An appointment with Dr. Moon was about to appear. Rebecca Rivera, specialist in high-risk obstetrics, San Francisco. 2 days from now, 10 in the morning. Prepaid. Transportation arranged. No note. No explanation. Eleanor held the card with shaking hands, Margaret's warning echoing in her mind. Everything costs something. You just don't know the price yet. 3 weeks passed like pages turning in a book Eleanor didn't know she was reading. Mornings became her favourite time. Dawn broke soft over the valley, painting everything gold and quiet. She'd arrive at the stables before the rest of the staff woke, when the world belonged to her and Midnight alone. The stallion would nicker softly when he heard her footsteps, pressing his nose against the stall door and greeting. They built a language together. Not words exactly. Understanding. Eleanor learned his moods. The flick of his ear that meant contentment. The particular snort when he wanted to run. The way he leaned into her touch when something bothered him. Midnight learned her limits too. Moved carefully around her growing belly. Stood perfectly still when she needed to lean against him for balance. Alessandro watched from windows that changed daily. Monday, the library. Tuesday, the terrace. Wednesday, the second-floor corridor. He told himself he was monitoring progress, ensuring his investment remained sound. But Gabriel knew better. The entire staff knew better. Small changes accumulated like snow building toward an avalanche. Elena's room received blackout curtains without explanation. The kitchen began leaving nutritious snacks in the staff break room. Almonds, fresh fruit, cheese. Items that appeared precisely when Elena took her breaks. Her schedule was quietly adjusted to avoid heavy lifting. When she needed to travel to San Francisco for her appointment with Dr. Rivera, a car appeared with Gabriel at the wheel, professional and polite. Mr. Salvatore wanted to ensure you had reliable transportation, Gabriel explained. Elena accepted these gifts with growing confusion and gratitude. She'd spent so long invisible that being seen felt dangerous and necessary in equal measure. The doctor's appointment revealed everything was progressing normally. Baby was healthy. Elena was healthy despite the exhaustion. Due date confirmed. 4 weeks now. Dr. Rivera provided her personal number. Call anytime. Mr. Spiral Roll-Up. Salvatore was very clear you should have immediate access. Elena didn't ask how Alessandro knew she needed a specialist, didn't question why he'd arranged it. Some gifts you accept because refusing them would be foolish. She focused on what she could control, caring for Midnight, saving money, preparing mentally for the reality that in 4 weeks everything would change again. The estate settled into autumn, leaves turned gold and red. Morning air carried a chill that made Midnight playful. Elena watched him run circles around the paddock, powerful and free, and felt something close to joy. She didn't notice the pattern until later. Alessandro's walks coincided with her schedule. When she arrived at dawn, he appeared on the terrace 15 minutes later. When she worked afternoons, he found reasons to pass the stables, never approaching, never speaking, just present. Late afternoon on a Thursday, Elena was brushing Midnight's coat when the first contraction hit. Sharp, sudden. A band of pressure that wrapped around her belly and squeezed. She stopped mid-stroke, hand freezing on the brush. Midnight turned his head, sensing her distress. "It's fine," she whispered. "Just..." The second contraction arrived, stronger. Eleanor gasped, dropping the brush. Her hand flew to her belly, supporting the weight that suddenly felt too heavy. Not now, please not now. 4 weeks early. She wasn't ready. She moved carefully to the wooden bench outside the stall, lowering herself with shaking hands. Midnight followed, pressing his nose against her shoulder. Worried, protective, Elena tried to breathe through it, counted seconds, focused on the rhythm her body was creating without permission. The contractions came irregular, painful, but not unbearable. False labor, maybe, hopefully. "Please be false labor," she whispered. Alessandro rounded the corner of the stables at exactly 4:30, the same time he'd been coincidentally walking past for 3 weeks. He saw Elena on the bench, saw her face, saw her hand pressed against her belly. He moved faster than she'd ever seen him move. "What's wrong?" His voice was sharp, controlled panic beneath professional composure. "I'm fine, just..." Another contraction cut through her words. Elena gritted her teeth, riding it out. "Don't move." Alessandro already had his phone out. "I'm calling Dr. Rivera. You don't need to..." "Stop." His voice carried an edge of something Elena had never heard before. Fear, maybe. Or fury directed at his own helplessness. "You're not fine. Stop being stubborn." He spoke rapidly into the phone, giving their address, describing symptoms. Eleanor heard 8 months pregnant, and contractions, and yes, immediately. Alessandro ended the call. "She's coming. 40 minutes. I can't afford. I'm handling it." He sat beside her on the bench, close but not touching. "How far apart? I don't know. 5 minutes? Maybe less?" His jaw tightened. "Have you been feeling off today? I'm always tired." "I didn't think..." "You should have said something." Elena would have laughed if another contraction hadn't arrived. She breathed through it, feeling Alessandro's presence beside her like a wall she could lean against if she let herself. Midnight stood guard on her other side, utterly still. Dr. Wade. Rivera arrived in 35 minutes, professional and efficient. She examined Elena right there in the stables, asking questions, taking vitals, checking measurements. Alessandro stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, watching every movement. "Braxton Hicks, Doctor," Rivera finally announced. "False labor. Completely normal at this stage, though quite uncomfortable. The baby is fine." "You're fine." Relief flooded through Elena so powerfully she nearly cried. "However," the doctor continued, "you need rest, real rest. No more standing for hours, no heavy work. Your body is preparing for delivery. Listen to it." Eleanor nodded, exhausted. Dr. Rivera packed her equipment, gave Elena strict instructions, and left with a promise to check in tomorrow. The sun was setting now, painting the valley in shades of amber and shadow. Alessandro remained. Elena expected him to leave. Instead, he sat back down on the bench, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground. If you think Alessandro is falling for Elena, or if you think this is just guilt, tell me in the comments. I need to hear your honest take, because what comes next will test everything. Minutes passed in silence. Midnight grazed peacefully nearby. The estate settled into evening quiet. Finally, Alessandro spoke. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "When this baby comes, where will you go?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Eleanor stared at her hands, thought about her savings, barely enough for 2 months of rent in a cheap apartment, thought about childcare costs she couldn't afford, thought about working while caring for a newborn alone, thought about all the plans that weren't really plans, just desperate hope. "I don't know," she admitted. Alessandro turned to look at her. Really look at her. His expression was unreadable in the fading light. Eleanor met his gaze and saw something that terrified her more than false labor. He cared, genuinely cared, and she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The message arrived on a Thursday morning, wrapped in courtesy that fooled no one. Alessandro sat in his study reviewing contracts when Gabriel entered, expression carefully neutral. He carried a single envelope, expensive paper, no return address. "This was delivered to the front gate, sir, hand-delivered by courier." Alessandro took the envelope. Inside, a handwritten note on cream cardstock. "Heard you've developed an affection for horses and maids. How domesticated you've become." The Brennans, beneath the words. A photograph. Eleanor in the paddock, hand on Midnight's neck, belly swollen with pregnancy, taken from distance with a telephoto lens. Professional quality. Alessandro's blood went cold. When did this arrive? 10 minutes ago. Get Owen. Now. 5 minutes later, Owen Kane stood before the desk, shoulders tight with tension. Alessandro slid the photograph across the surface. "Explain." Owen studied the image, jaw clenching. "Someone's been watching the estate. I'll pull security footage immediately. Check perimeter cameras." "How long, sir? How long have they been watching?" Alessandro's voice carried lethal calm. "I don't know. But if they got this shot, they've had eyes on us for at least a week. Maybe longer." Alessandro stood, walking to the window. Below, Eleanor was probably with Midnight right now, completely unaware that men who dealt in violence for profit had been photographing her. "The Brennans are testing me," he said quietly. "They want to see if I'll protect her or sacrifice her." Owen shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, with respect, she's a liability. A pregnant maid. She doesn't belong in this world. Maybe it's better if what?" Alessandro turned and Owen took an involuntary step back. "If I send her away? Prove to the Brennans that threatening someone under my roof works? I'm thinking about her safety. So am I. Then you know keeping her here puts her in danger." Alessandro's hands curled into fists. The dilemma was suffocating. Send Elena away. She'd be vulnerable, alone, unprotected. Keep her close. She'd be a target specifically because she mattered to him. Both options felt like failure. "Double security," Alessandro ordered. "I want eyes on every entrance. Background checks on every staff member hired in the last 6 months. Camera coverage increased. And I want to know who took this photograph." "Sir..." "She stays." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "She's under my protection. That makes her untouchable. Send that message to the Brennans. Make it very clear." Owen hesitated. "You're sure about this?" "Get out." Owen left quickly. Alessandro stared at the photograph for long minutes. Elena looked peaceful in the image, happy even, completely unaware of the sharks circling. He'd done this. By caring, he'd painted a target on her back. The realization tasted like ash. 20 minutes later, Elena sat in his study for the second time, confusion written across her face. "Mr. Salvatore, if I've done something wrong, you haven't." Alessandro remained standing, unable to sit. "I need to explain something. About who I am, what I do." Eleanor waited. "You know I'm powerful. You probably know my name carries weight, but you don't know the extent." He paused, choosing words carefully. "My family has been involved in organized crime for 3 generations. I've spent the last 15 years building an empire that operates on fear, influence, and violence when necessary. I'm not a businessman in the legitimate sense. I'm a criminal." Elena's expression didn't change much. "I guess something like that." Alessandro blinked. "You guessed. Nobody has this much security and this much privacy unless they're hiding from something. Or hiding something. I figured you were either witness protection or..." She gestured vaguely. Her pragmatism caught him off guard. "A rival family sent me a message today. They've been watching you, photographing you. They know you matter to me." Now fear flickered across her face. "Matter to you? Yes. No point denying it. Which makes you a target. A way to hurt me." Eleanor's hand moved instinctively to her belly. "What does that mean?" "It means you're in danger because I was careless enough to show I care." The words hung between them, heavier than he'd intended. Elena stood abruptly. "So what? You're telling me this as a warning? Or as a goodbye?" "I'm telling you because you deserve to know the situation." "The situation." Her voice climbed. "You made this decision without asking me. You decided I mattered. You decided to care. Now you're telling me I'm in danger because of choices you made?" Alessandro hadn't expected anger. "I'm trying to protect you. By making me a target, by dragging me into a world I never asked to be part of. Elena's eyes flashed. I've spent my whole life trying to stay invisible. You're the one who pulled me into the light. You stepped into that paddock. You made yourself visible. To save a horse, not to become part of some Mafia power struggle. I know, Alessandro's voice dropped, and I'm sorry, but the choice now is simple. I can send you away, give you money, arrange safe housing somewhere far from here. You'd be alone, but safer. Or you can stay under my protection, which is real protection, Elena. No one touches what's mine. Elena stared at him. What's yours? Poor phrasing. What I protect, she laughed bitterly. At least you're honest about the ownership. That's not what I meant, isn't it? Elena moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back. You want to know what I think? I think you're scared. Not of the Brennans, of caring about someone. So you're giving me an out, a way to leave so you don't have to feel responsible. Alessandro said nothing. The accuracy hurt.
Eleanor took a breath, composing herself. I'm not leaving.
You should. I'm not leaving because some criminal family decided on leverage. I'm not running because powerful men think they can make me. I've run before, from Montana, from my past, from everything. I'm done running. You don't understand what you're choosing. I understand perfectly. Elena's voice steadied. I'm choosing not to let fear win. Same way I chose to walk into that paddock. Alessandro studied her. 8 months pregnant, exhausted, vulnerable in every measurable way, yet standing in his study refusing to back down from danger she shouldn't have to face. Courage had nothing to do with size or strength. He understood that now. Then you stay, he said quietly, but you follow my rules, security protocols. No arguments, no exceptions. The war has begun, Alessandro added. You need to understand that. I understand. Elena met his gaze steadily. Do you? She left before he could answer. 24 hours stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Security doubled overnight. New guards patrol perimeters at 15-minute intervals. Cameras that had covered blind spots were upgraded. Owen coordinated shifts from the command center, tracking every vehicle that passed within a mile of the estate. Staff received instructions. Report anything unusual, anyone unfamiliar, any deviation from normal patterns. The entire property held its breath. Elena refused to hide. Morning arrived and she walked to the stables at her usual time, ignoring Gabriel's attempt to escort her. She brought Midnight his apple slices, brushed his coat, spoke to him about nothing important. The routine mattered more than safety. If she let fear dictate her movements, the Brennans won without firing a shot. Alessandro spent the night in the security room, eyes fixed on monitors showing every angle of the estate. Owen brought him coffee at midnight, then again at 3. Neither spoke much. There was nothing to say. They waited for violence that never came. Dawn broke soft and gold across the valley. Nothing had happened. The threat was psychological, a reminder that the Brennans could reach him if they chose. A test to see if Alessandro would flinch. He hadn't. But the exhaustion of constant vigilance left him hollow. He found Elena in the stables at sunrise. She stood beside Midnight, one hand resting on the stallion's shoulder. The horse was completely relaxed, head lowered, eyes half closed in contentment. Morning light filtered through the wooden slats, painting everything in shades of amber. The scene looked peaceful in a way that felt impossible after the night Alessandro had just endured. Eleanor turned when she heard footsteps. Her expression shifted from calm to concern. You look terrible. Good morning to you too. Did you sleep at all? No. She studied him with that same directness that had caught his attention in the paddock weeks ago. No pretense. No careful navigation of social hierarchy. Just honest observation. Nothing happened, did it? She asked. No. Then they got what they wanted. They made you afraid. Alessandro leaned against the stall door, suddenly too tired to maintain his usual composure. They didn't make me afraid for myself. Elena understood immediately. Her hand moved to her belly in that unconscious protective gesture. I can take care of myself. You're 8 months pregnant and weighing maybe 120 pounds. Taking care of yourself has limits. So does controlling everything around you. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Midnight shifted position, pressing his nose against Elena's shoulder. She stroked his neck absently, attention still fixed on Alessandro. You could have sent me away, she said quietly. Last night, this morning, any time in the last 24 hours. Why didn't you? Alessandro opened his mouth, closed it. The answer should have been simple, practical, about strategy and principles, and not letting threats dictate his decisions. But that wasn't the truth, because He struggled to find words for something he'd never articulated before. Because you showed me something I'd forgotten existed. What? That power doesn't have to destroy. He pushed off the stall door, moving closer. That control can look like trust. Elena's expression softened. Alessandro,
I've been watching you, he interrupted, not just with the horse.
every morning, every afternoon, telling myself it was about protecting my investment, about ensuring you were doing your job properly. He laughed bitterly. I was lying to myself. I know. Alessandro's eyes snapped to hers. You know?
I saw you. In the windows.
On the terrace, walking past at exactly the same times. Elena's voice carried no judgment. You were watching me the same way you watch everything else, trying to understand something that doesn't fit your worldview. And what did you see when you watched back? Elena considered the question seriously. Fear. The word hit harder than any physical blow. You move through this world like midnight moved through that paddock, she continued. Powerful, dangerous, absolutely convinced that if you show vulnerability, something will destroy you. You've built walls so high nobody can reach you, and you're exhausted from maintaining them. Alessandro couldn't speak. She'd seen him, actually seen him. Not the reputation or the power or the carefully constructed image, the wounded thing beneath. You and Midnight aren't that different, Elena said softly. Both of you learn that the world responds to force. Both of you got hurt when you trusted. Both of you decided safety meant never letting anyone close enough to hurt you again. That's not. It is. Eleanor stepped closer, close enough that Alessandro could see the exhaustion in her eyes that mirrored his own. You spent 6 months trying to dominate that horse. It didn't work. The same way spending years dominating everyone around you hasn't worked. You're still terrified, just better at hiding it. The parallel was too accurate to deny. Alessandro had been fighting the same battle as Midnight. Fear disguised as aggression. Isolation disguised as strength. Control disguised as safety. I don't know how to be anything else, he admitted. Yes, you do. You've been practicing for 3 weeks. Elena's hand moved from Midnight's neck to Alessandro's arm. The touch was light, careful, giving him space to pull away if he needed. You've been gentle with me. You arranged medical care. You adjusted my schedule. You made sure I had what I needed without demanding anything in return. That's not domination. That's care. Alessandro stared at her hand on his arm. Such a small gesture. It shouldn't have meant anything. It meant everything. You terrify me, he said quietly. Not because you're dangerous, because you make me want things I gave up wanting years ago. Like what? Safety that doesn't require walls. Connection that doesn't cost pieces of myself. The possibility that someone could see who I actually am and not run. Elena's eyes held his. I'm not running. You should. Stop telling me what I should do. Her voice carried gentle firmness. I'm standing here. I saw what you are. I chose to stay. That was my decision. Respect it. Alessandro felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking. Opening. The difference mattered immensely. What do you want, Alessandro? Elena asked. The question hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. He looked at her, really looked, at the woman who'd calmed his horse, who'd refused to run from danger, who'd seen his fear and called it by name, who stood in his stables at dawn, 8 months pregnant and absolutely certain of her own courage. I don't know, he answered honestly, but I know I can't let you leave. 2 weeks later, the threat dissolved like morning fog under sunlight. Alessandro handled it the way he handled all business. Efficiently, decisively, with enough force to ensure the message landed permanently. The Brannans received clear communication about boundaries and consequences. Whatever negotiations occurred happened behind closed doors, in rooms Elena would never see. She didn't ask for details. Some things were better left unknown. Life returned to rhythm but different than before. Elena, now 9 months pregnant and moving with the careful slowness of someone carrying too much weight, still visited Midnight every morning. Alessandro no longer pretended he wasn't watching. Owen's presence became standard, hovering at a respectful distance, radio always within reach, eyes scanning perimeters. But the tension had shifted, no longer waiting for violence, just protective awareness. The change in Alessandro was visible to everyone who worked the estate. His commands came softer now, though no less authoritative. He paused before responding, actually listening when staff spoke. Moments of quiet observation replaced his usual restless energy. Gabriel noticed first, then Maria, then the kitchen staff, the groundskeepers, everyone whose livelihood depended on reading their employers' moods. He asked about Elena's comfort before discussing the quarterly reports. Gabriel mentioned to Owen over coffee. He delayed a meeting with the distributors because she had a doctor's appointment. Owen replied. He personally approved the cottage renovation. Do you know what that space was before? Storage. Now it has a nursery. They exchanged knowing looks. Their boss was falling. Had fallen, really. He just hadn't said it aloud yet. Late afternoon sun painted the paddock in shades of gold. Elena stood with Midnight, one hand resting on her enormous belly, the other stroking the stallion's neck. She was tired, bone-deep exhaustion that came from growing a human while maintaining routines that probably exceeded doctor recommendations. But stopping felt like surrender. She'd come too far to surrender now. From the limestone terrace 60 feet above, Alessandro watched the same scene that had started everything 7 weeks ago. Same position, same woman, same horse. Everything different. He'd been standing here when Elena first stepped into chaos and transformed it. Watched her offer gentleness where everyone else offered force. Watched her prove that power could take forms he'd never imagined. Now she stood in that same paddock, 9 months pregnant, completely at peace with an animal that had once been uncontrollable. The irony wasn't lost on him. Midnight lowered his massive head and nuzzled Elena's belly gently. She laughed. Alessandro could see it in the curve of her shoulders even if he couldn't hear the sound. Then something happened that stopped time. The baby kicked, hard enough that Midnight felt it through Elena's dress. The stallion went absolutely still, ears forward, as if listening to something miraculous. Alessandro found himself moving before conscious thought caught up. Down the terrace steps, across the lawn, through the paddock gate. He walked toward them, drawn by something stronger than intention. Eleanor looked up as he approached. Surprise flickered across her face, but not fear. Never fear, not anymore. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, not quite sure what he was doing or why. He's gentler now, Elena said, breaking the silence. You see it? Alessandro watched Midnight stand perfectly calm beside her. I see it. Fear doesn't last forever. Not if someone gives you a reason to trust. The words carried weight beyond the horse. Alessandro understood that. Is that what you did? He asked quietly. For him? For me? Elena considered the question with her usual careful honesty. I just offered what I had. The rest was your choice. What she'd offered was safety without conditions, patience without judgment, the radical concept that trust could be given freely instead of earned through tests and trials. Alessandro had spent 38 years believing the opposite. She'd dismantled that belief in 7 weeks. I have something for you, he said. Elena raised an eyebrow. Another doctor's appointment? Legal papers? He pulled the envelope from his jacket. Midnight is yours. Full ownership. Transferred this morning. Elena stared at the envelope like it might explode. Alessandro, I can't. It's dumb. He's yours. You earned him. I didn't earn anything. You transformed him from a problem I couldn't solve into something peaceful. That's earning. Alessandro held out the papers until she took them with shaking hands. There's more. More? The cottage on the east side of the property. The one that overlooks the oak forest. I've had it renovated. 3 bedrooms, full kitchen, separate entrance. Yours if you want it. For you and the baby. Eleanor's eyes widened. You renovated a cottage for me. For you both. No rent, no conditions. Just safety. Alessandro met her gaze steadily. I'm not asking you to stay in my house or be part of my world beyond what you choose. I'm offering you a home where you can raise your child without fear. That's all. That's not all, Elena's voice trembled. That's everything. It's what you deserve. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Why go this far? Why offer this much? Why care about a pregnant maid who'd stumbled into his life by accident? Alessandro looked at Midnight, then at Elena, then at the papers in her hands. Because you taught me something I thought I'd forgotten, he said. That power doesn't require cruelty, that strength can look like gentleness, that the most dangerous thing I could do was keep building walls when what I needed was a door. Elena's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Alessandro, you don't have to answer now. The cottage is there. The horse is yours. Take whatever time you need. So that's the story of how a pregnant maid tamed not just a wild stallion, but something even more dangerous, a man who'd forgotten how to kneel. If this stayed with you, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories about power, gentleness, and the courage it takes to choose trust over fear. Midnight moved between them, pressing his nose against Elena's belly one more time. The baby kicked again. The horse made a soft sound, almost protective. Alessandro watched them, woman and horse and unborn child, and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless his entire life. Eleanor reached out slowly, carefully, and placed her hand over his. Thank you, she whispered. 2 words. They contained universes. The sun dropped lower, painting everything gold. The valley stretched below them, vast and beautiful. Somewhere in the main house, life continued. Staff preparing dinner, security monitoring perimeters, business requiring attention. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. The stallion bowed his head to Elena one more time, and Alessandro, deliberately, consciously, did the same. Not in submission, in respect. Love doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a sugar cube offered on an open palm, and changes everything.